Hello, Julie.
Good afternoon, my friend.
Good afternoon.
I've been really looking forward to this.
Well, me too. One, to see your lovely face.
Thank you. I feel the same about you. Yeah.
And two, I'm excited to talk about Terry Tempest Williams today.
Yeah, I am so thrilled that you are doing an exploration on her work because I think she is magic.
I feel magical when I read her. Um, Maybe we should give a little background. You know, a couple weeks ago, we both stumbled upon a short poem, a long quote by Terry Tempest Williams. I'm not going to say what that is yet,
Okay.
but that took me down a rabbit hole. Who is this woman who pieced these words together that just pierced through my heart and my soul? And I've been on this mission.
I love it when that happens.
Yes. So her name is Terry Tempest Williams. And I did rediscover that I had discovered her a few years ago um, during an interview with Krista Tippett on Being, and I'll put that link for us. So Terry Tempest Williams is an well, she's a deep soul. Let's say she's a deep soul. She is an environmentalist, a naturalist, an activist, and a writer at her core. She's from the South. She lives in Utah currently. I think she's lived there for most of her life, landing there after her father's military service, but this is where her family roots are. And she's taken ventures in her life out to explore other places and other people, which have those experiences combined with her rich childhood have really shaped who she is and how she thinks about our environment, how she feels about women in history and in present day. And she says some of the most thought-provoking lines in everyday conversation, which is something I appreciate. There's one line where she's talking about she's at a party and someone says, well, what do you do? As in, what do you do for a living? But her response to the question, what do you do, was about what? And that response.
Yeah, that's a good answer, actually.
What do I do about the things that are important to me, the things that matter to me? Yeah.
So I've learned to ask people, especially in new situations, so tell me what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And that sometimes people you can tell, sometimes it's like, oh God.
Yes.
Mostly people are like, wow, no one has asked me that in a while, or I haven't thought about that in a while. Or they launch right into telling you something that they're about.
Yes.
I always found that, that kind of, so, what do you do for a living question? Like that doesn't always tell you anything about anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I love that. What do you do? What do you
do?
Related to what? Grammatically, that is not a very good question.
Right. Yeah, it reminds me of our meditation teacher training. And before you knew anybody, the introduction of who you are. And after we go around the circle saying, I'm a this, I'm a that, I do this, then there's the invitation from our teacher to answer that question from the soul. And that shifted everything, because I could list all these things of labels of who I am and labels of what I do. But then I realized, really, who am I? How do I move through the world? That's how I want to lead an introduction of myself.
Yeah. I remember years ago watching an episode of Oprah Winfrey. And remember the old VHS tapes that you had to record on? So I used to record them, and then at night when the kids were like in bed and, and I'm folding laundry or whatever, I'd pop in the tape of that day's recording of the Oprah show. And I remember Oprah had a guest on named Iyanla Vanzant. And she's this really sort of, vivacious, black, bold woman. And they were having this lively conversation. And I'm folding laundry. Of course, you can never just do one thing when you're a mom with, little kids. You're multitasking all the time. And I remember Iyanla Vanzant was talking about how you introduce yourself to people, like, how you show up in the world. And I remember her saying, and like with such conviction, this was the thing, it just sort of stopped me in my tracks. She said, "I am a daughter in whom God is well pleased." And I just remember thinking, oh my God, I would love to have the confidence to be able to introduce myself that way and like not feel like an idiot. Like that was like a soul speaking to a soul. That was such a powerful, and I just felt like she was like poking through the airwaves of like, right. Remember who you are.
Remember who you are.
Yeah, that was really one of those moments that burned in the brain.
Right.
Yeah.
So we come across this short poem, long quote, with the first line being, "Once upon a time when women were birds." And so it has taken me on this quest to re-listen to this On Being podcast with Terry Tempest Williams. But it also took me on a quest, this line, "Once upon a time when women were birds." So, the book, When Women Were Birds. There's so much goodness in this book. I want to say two things. One is this book being inspired by the journals that her mother left her. And when her mother was dying, she said, "Terry, I'm leaving you all of my journals." And she waited a full moon cycle before she went. And she went into the cabinet, and there's lines of journals. Lines of journals. And so she takes out the first journal. I'm paraphrasing, but with this anticipation, because she comes from a line of Mormon women who keep journals as a way to pass down little things of how to bake a cake under these circumstances to bigger things about being a wife and a mother. So she takes down the first, what knowledge, right, is my mom going to pass down? Blank pages. She takes down the second one, blank pages. The third one, blank pages. Every journal is blank. And so now her mom has passed, and so she doesn't have the opportunity to ask her mom about these blank pages. And so she's left with finding her mother's voice. So this book, When Women Were Birds, is this search for her mother's voice in these journals.
That just takes you on such a, like, wanting to know what the message is, what's
What?
behind the blank pages.
What?
Yeah, that's.
What is it? And the most wonderful thing she did was, here's chapter 1, and then there's a blank page,
pages.
and a blank page, and a blank page. And you begin to have a little sense of what this must have felt like for her.
Uh-huh. Oh man, that's potent.
Scattered throughout this is a relationship she had with her grandmother around bird watching. And I remember my grandparents used to have their bird field guide book and binoculars, and they would spend time. And I never fully understood this. But as I'm reading this book, I'm having this sense of the slowing down to watch a bird.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells this story. She's 8 years old. She's at a birthday party outside, and they're playing, and she sees a bird that she thinks it's a certain kind of bird. And she leaves the party to sit solitary watching this bird. And then when she's called back by the mother of the birthday girl, please come back to the party, she has the soul wisdom at 8 to say, I think this is X, Y, and Z kind of bird, and I need to call my grandmother. She called her grandmother, and her grandmother came right over.
Oh, wow.
And instead of going back to the party, they watched this bird. And then she goes to the Audubon Society to declare that she has seen this bird that's rare.
Oh, okay, so that was part of it. It was a bird she knew was rare.
Yes.
Wow.
And she was told, because she's 8 years old, it doesn't count as a true sighting.
Oh.
But she didn't lose sight of, she knew what she saw.
Yeah.
And she didn't let them discount that.
Oh, yeah, a rare soul indeed.
A rare soul. So I'm reading this book in search of, my first thought was, I have to find this quote. This is the only thing I'm interested in. But then it grew and grew. And so I took our initial quote and I deconstructed the book. And so what I am reading today is Terry Tempest Williams, When Women Were Birds, by Susan Vichick Johnson.
I love it. Oh, this makes my heart so happy. You have no idea.
So Terry Tempest Williams, When Women Were Birds, by Susan Vichick Johnson.
All right, would you like me to ring a bell and kind of get us centered for this?
I would be honored if you do that for us, Julie.
Okay. Let's do it.
Once upon a time, when women were birds, there was the simple understanding to sing at dawn and to sing at dusk was to heal the world with joy. The birds still remember what we have forgotten, that the world is meant to be celebrated. Placed in a circle we mask our needs as the needs of others. If ever there was a story without a shadow, it would be this. We as women exist in direct sunlight only. We as women exist in direct sunlight only. When women were birds, we knew our greatest freedom was in taking flight at night when we could steal the heavenly darkness for ourselves, navigating through the intelligence of stars and the constellations of our own making in the delight and terror of uncertainty. In the delight and terror of uncertainty. When we don't listen to our intuition, we abandon our souls. And when we abandon our souls because we're afraid if we don't, others will abandon us. We've been raised to question what we know, to discount and discredit the authority of our divine self. Once upon a time, when women were birds, there was the simple understanding that to sing at dawn and to sing at dusk was to heal the world through joy. The birds still remember what we have forgotten, that the world is meant to be celebrated. I am a woman with wings, dancing with other women with wings. I am a woman with wings, dancing with other women with wings.
Well, that one causes you to feel all the feels.
I was going to say, I have so much feeling, on the verge of tears as I was reading this.
You know that line about the line about direct sunlight? Read that again.
Yes, we as women exist in direct sunlight only.
That's so potent to me because I actually have been doing a lot of sort of Celtic history, investigation and kind of watching some interesting things about, Bridget, who was the goddess Bridget before Bridget was Saint Bridget. And one of the things that continues to sort of like strike me is the idea of the goddess in darkness and doing important healing work related to the dark arts and related to, and how something that was so much a natural part of the light and the dark and the shadow, and neither was considered negative or positive, good or bad. Both are essential because both follow the cycle of the sun and the moon. And like, you wouldn't have one without the other. So why would you? And how slowly, as the dominant sort of Christian traditions sort of kind of encompass Scotland and Ireland and Wales and, points between, the darkness, the shadow side of the goddess and female energy and things that were once held in reverence and normal became evil.
Right.
Now, first putting that on women in particular and diminishing something that I feel like we're all fighting so hard today to get back to. Balance, the balance point in
The
all.
balance. Mm-hmm.
So it struck me a very interesting thing that language was used. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I really resonated with, we abandon our souls because we're afraid if we don't, others will abandon us.
Oh, and yes,
And
think
how
about that
quickly,
historically. Yeah.
we're willing to discount and discredit our souls out of fear
Mm-hmm.
that others will abandon us if we don't. Like, we have to diminish ourselves in order to have what? Relationships that aren't authentic?
Well, it's definitely part of the primal part of our brain is you don't want to not have the group take care of you. And the worst thing that could possibly happen to you historically was to be kicked out of the clan, to be kicked out of your home. And as a woman, historically, if we look at just the history of, you were property of a father before you then became property of a husband. I mean, there
Mhm.
is a lot of that false evidence appearing real today. Even though we don't live in that world today, that's sticky stuff. That's deeply, I think, entwined in our DNA. And depending on, your family of origin and how you were, treated or mistreated in a family dynamic, that's going to range
Right.
all over the world differently. It's going to look
Well,
very
because as young girls were taught, oh, ignore your own intuition in order to stay within the family, as very young. So I think about that story when she's 8 years old and she's told, oh, because you're 8 years old, that sighting doesn't count.
and to stand up to a grown-up at a birthday party and say, no, I need to take care of business here. I mean, that is what I loved, is that sense of like strong sense of knowing herself and like knowing that, oh no, this is important, this matters.
Right.
That's really, gosh, yeah.
You know, earlier you and I were talking about our wisdom caps that we've been wearing, and I feel like, part of allowing the gray to come, the wisdom to shine, is a remembrance when we were so young, and the only thing we knew was our soul, and we didn't know that there was any other way to exist in the world except coming from our soul. And I feel like I'm spending a lot of time reclaiming that.
Yeah, I think that is potent about a sort of like a chance to do it a little differently now, knowing what we know.
Right.
You spend time, and I can only speak of being raised in sort of Western culture here in the United States of America at the time that I came up. You spend time sort of kind of being free, and it's okay if your hair is kind of a mess. You don't really like think about how you look until you hit a certain age as a girl, and then a huge amount of time and energy sort of gets fixated around looking like the little clique, the little group that you hang with. And all of a sudden the judgment and the criticism and the negative self-talk and all that gets really like ramped up, and it just can like carry us through into adulthood. And sometimes we catch it and fix it and course correct. And some of us are still trying to course correct. And some of us aren't even aware we've been living with that on our souls. So, yeah, I think about that a lot lately too, because having now, having given birth to daughters, it was always really important to me to remind them on whose shoulders they stand and where they are lucky enough to now sort of evolve to as a result of a lot of women who did things really hard, including family members, women who did things hard.
Right.
And to always honor who they are, that was really an important conscious choice I made, coming out of not really hearing that message necessarily at home. But I did hear it through nuns, believe it or not, through Catholic nuns in school. So I do feel like I got some good messaging out of that. But now I have granddaughters. And it's a very conscious decision that as a grandmother, stewarding them, loving them, and teaching them and sharing with them, I want them to skip that step of like ever thinking they're anything precious and beautiful and smart and the whole package.
Right.
And to not focus on so much following the tribe.
And I feel like sometimes this can be the wisdom of our grandmothers because, as grandmothers, we're not caught up in the day-to-day of raising and all, just of the day-to-day of you have to brush your teeth. No, you can't, you can't stay up till midnight. I need you to go to sleep. Just these things. Mm-hmm. But, as grandmothers, we get to be in this other place, right? And just thinking of our grandmothers. I think of my grandmother, who I would spend a lot of time with on Sunday afternoons, and just didn't have to worry about what's going to happen if I say this or say that or do this. I could just be. Just be. Yeah.
And maybe that's the beauty of being older. You're ready to slow it down a little bit again, and almost like a retrograde to kind of go back and collect yourself a little bit more. And little people are the best people to teach us about mindfulness.
Right.
Because, nobody can like slow you down like a little kid on a nature walk who's really wanting to like look at what this bug is doing. And I think it's almost like you as an older person matched up with this little person are perfectly matched for each other to be that blessing both ways. Yeah, it's kind of sweet.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that, as we begin to gray, that's when this remembrance starts happening, because this is the time of life where we do begin to slow down. We're not climbing the mountain of establishing relationships, establishing careers, those sorts of things, raising children. We're on the other side of that. And so we have we're afforded the opportunity to slow down and feel our way into things. And so when I sometimes am filled with regret of, I wish I had done it this way at this earlier time, I try and be kind to myself and remember this is exactly the time that this is supposed to be happening. And just show a little kindness.
Good.
Yeah. This remembrance of when we were birds.
And I love the symbolism of the birds. Birds as dinosaurs, the ancient ones, you know, like having roots in the beginnings, you know, all of that. I have a really good friend who is from Eritrea, Africa.
Hmm.
And I remember we were at lunch one day. She was here going to school in Arizona, and we were at lunch one day and we were talking, and she broke off a piece of her sandwich. And we were just talking, and she reached over and placed it on the little like half wall that was next to our table
Mhm.
we were eating. And then, you know, kept on talking, but I like noticed this. So I was like, asked her, I got to ask, what was that all about? What did you just, why did you just put that piece of bread there? And she was like, oh, like it hadn't even, she just naturally did it without thinking about it. And she said, oh, it's for the ancient ones. We always feed our ancestors.
Oh.
And so birds in her culture are her ancestors. And
Hmm.
I just always found that so charming and endearing, and you know,
Lovely.
yeah. So every time I see birds and I have food with me, I do that for her, keeping that little thing going, because it just always was so
Yeah.
special.
There's that slowing down and that remembrance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's what resonated when I read, the original quote was, once upon a time when women were birds, there was the simple understanding that to sing at dawn and to sing at dusk was to heal the world through joy. The birds will remember what we have forgotten, that the world is meant to be celebrated. So that was the original quote that took me on this quest of remembering what was forgotten and the celebrating. And there's something about in the remembering, we remember to celebrate in that slowing down.
I just want to get a big wall and paint the words, to sing at dawn and to sing at dusk is to heal the world in joy.
Enjoy.
Yeah, yeah, that needs like a big splash somewhere.
I think I feel a piece of art coming on, Julie.
Could be.
Let's see. Well, let's leave it with the last lines of Terry Tempest Williams, when women were birds, by Susan Johnson.
Okay.
I am a woman with wings, dancing with other women with wings. Thank you for dancing with me, Julie.
Wow. My pleasure, my friend. Anytime.
Lovely dance. Lovely dance.
I'm so glad you deconstructed that with your voice in there. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you. It was a lot of fun. It could have been much longer because there were lots of just lines that spoke to me, but yeah, thanks.
It's just right.
All right. So until next time, remember
Right.
to sing at dawn and sing at dusk.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, my friend.